We start with the updates coming in from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Rwanda-backed M23 rebels continue their advance in DRC's mineral-rich east. The rebels have seized the airport serving the city of Bukavu. Now, the capital of South Kivu province, and this comes after the Rwanda-backed rebels threatened to capture the town of Kavumu near the airport. This represents a major strategic victory for the rebels as it cuts off air supply routes for DRC army and humanitarian operations in the region. The rebels have so far North Kivu's capital Goma, the largest city in the mineral-rich east, and they have now entered neighbouring South Kivu and have seized Kavumu, where the army had set up a defensive line. After breaching this, they can easily target South Kivu's capital of Bukavu. Rebels' advance comes as African leaders are gathering to discuss the crisis at the AU summit. However, the DRC president, Felix and his Rwandan counterpart, Paul Kagame's presence is not confirmed. Tshisekedi is currently in Germany to attend the Munich Security Conference, but he will attend the formal African Union summit tomorrow in Addis Ababa. A joint summit of East and Southern African blocs also took place last week, and African leaders called for an immediate ceasefire and gave a 5-day deadline to enforce it. However, that deadline has passed today, and the fighting still continues. After a brief calm, the M23 rebels have resumed their march in the DRC's east. The M23 advance in DRC has stoked wider regional tensions. Peacekeeping troops from multiple African nations have been attacked and killed in the fighting, who have been warning Rwanda of retaliation. Now, Rwanda has been accused of providing the ethnic Tutsi rebels with military support and also using them to loot the DRC's crucial minerals in its east. International pressure is growing on Rwanda to withdraw its support. In the latest, the European Parliament has adopted a resolution that calls for the immediate suspension of the EU's minerals deal with Rwanda, as well as an end to the other European aid to the country. Under the deal, the EU gets access to the key rare earth raw material sources, of which Rwanda is the world's largest extractor. Additionally, EU lawmakers have pressed for strengthened sanctions against senior M23 officials. Meanwhile, a historic case brought by the DRC against Rwanda has also begun at the African Court of Human and People's Rights. Will the mounting pressure force Rwanda to negotiate, which has so far been saying it is maintaining defensive posture against the DRC's support to the rival ethnic militia? For more on this, we have with us Stephen Buchanan-Clark, the head of the Peace and Security Program at Good Governance Africa, joining us live from Cape Town in South Africa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Alyson.
And Stephen, what are the strategic implications of the M23 rebels now capturing more towns and seizing the airport in South Kivu? How does this affect the broader security situation in the region?
Yeah, it is a very significant development, as we're hearing just in the past few hours that M23 have taken Kavumu Airport in southern Kivu. Of course, Kavumu Airport is very close to the southern Kivu capital city of Bukavu. I think they seem to be following a similar strategy that they did in North Kivu province, where they took control of Goma Airport. This made it very difficult for, or impossible, should I say, for SAMIM and other international security actors to resupply their troops or to send reinforcements. So, Kavumu Airport is very strategically important for M23 as they continue to advance south. I also think the control of both southern and northern Kivu province by M23 is quite historic. And this really could push the Congolese government and regional allies into negotiating, and it places M23 in a very strong position to bargain if negotiations materialize in the coming weeks.
Right. And of course, despite the repeated calls for a ceasefire, the M23 advance continues. What are the key factors driving this conflict, and why have the peace efforts been unsuccessful so far?
Yeah, well, I think the first important thing to say is, the M23 have continued fighting simply because they can. There isn't a strong enough security actor in the Eastern DRC to stop them at this time. The Burundian forces there have seen significant losses. The Southern African mission of Mozambique in DRC has seen significant losses. The UN mission there is really a peacekeeping force, so it doesn't really have a mandate where it's going to aggressively go after M23 rebels. And we've heard in recent days massive defections from the DRC's military themselves. So that really is one of the reasons. Second, while regional leaders and Kagame himself has urged the DRC to enter directly into dialogue with the M23, Tshisekedi up until now has remained defiant and refuses to do so. I think he's doing this because he is concerned that if he agrees to enter into dialogue with M23, it's legitimizing their cause. And given that they hold a very strong position now with these territorial gains, it means that in a dialogue and negotiations, he would have to give them major concessions. And this could include things like positions in government, perhaps even control over certain territories, mining concessions. And he clearly does not want to do that. And fourth, maybe on a wider point, in terms of what's driving this conflict. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
Well, how might this escalation impact the neighbouring countries, especially in terms of refugee flows and, of course, regional stability? And could we see increased involvement from international actors or regional organizations?
Yeah, I think, just since over the last week, we've seen another roughly 3,000 people have been killed, another 3,000 injured, over 500,000 displaced. And bear in mind, this adds to roughly 6 million people who have been internally displaced over the past several years in Eastern DRC. We could see perhaps more flows of refugees, not just internally, but into Tanzania, into neighbors, Zambia. Also bear in mind, this comes at a time when, the US has ordered a stop work order on USAID officials and frozen aid, humanitarian aid. So this is very difficult, a humanitarian situation for the Eastern DRC. In terms of if we're going to see more international actors stepping up, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the SADC EAC summit last week has called for a number of interventions and immediate ceasefire, the merging of the Rwanda and Nairobi peace processes into one, dialogues with all parties. The EU Parliament has come out quite strongly, but at this time I don't see any forthcoming international military interventions in the Eastern DRC. I think they will try and exhaust additional non-military options at this time. There also is just a real reluctance, I think, to commit new troops or new military formations in a region where it's notoriously difficult to have a sort of exit strategy. I mean, for decades now, the Eastern DRC just hasn't built up its own military, therefore cannot have a monopoly on violence, and it creates this environment where political military actors, entrepreneurs, like Cornelia Nagar, who's head of M23's political wing, can take advantage and can really use this security vacuum to advance their own causes.
Right. Stephen, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued analysis on the latest out of the DRC.
Thank you.
We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we put together for you. Touted as the minimum defense from that video. India's neighbors were the first to send the special edition of Vantage live from the White House throughout this week. Yes, Hindu Mandir in we're on our way to Tel Aviv. Measure, but it's also the perfect way to drive
I don't think that
Prime Minister of Bhutan, Sherin Tagwe. Welcome to
60% of the world's
office. Prime Minister Modi did the iron.
We were actually
How are you doing? How do you like? It's been 1 year since that meeting. Iron bars separate you from the outside. Out the vote efforts. Trump had, it says, and at $4.3 trillion. 4.3 300 billion by 2030. That's what we need to tackle climate change.